How about now? Can you hear me now? Oh, great. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, I was having some tech issues. Let me start over here. We're going to start over here. There we go. Okay, guys. Well, welcome to the webinar. We are going to talk today about what it takes to be a medical coder. And we want to make sure that everyone is up to speed on this topic because a lot of you are here because you want to be a medical coder. You already have gone through a course, you have done the work, and you want to make sure you're successful. Now, of course, we did recently launch our externship program with AAPC. I want to shout out to AAPC for an amazing program that they offer to medical coders and, of course, auditors and different ones that want to get better and want to get their first job or maybe get better experience. So our externship we have is basically built on various aspects of that. And so if you're a part of the externship, I think some of you are here, others are interested but didn't quite get the first round, so stay tuned. But this is for everybody. This webinar is for everybody to see what it's like, right? We want you to understand what it really takes. I think a lot of those in our externship have already experienced what it takes because it's hard. And many of them have commented that it's definitely not like the exam because you are dissecting information without multiple choice questions. And that's what coders do. There is no multiple choice in the real world, as many of you probably might realize. And so I think that we need to understand that it is hard, but behind every reimbursed claim is you, a coder who did crack that code literally. Healthcare regulations grow more and more complex every year. I started in the year 2002 in the medical office. I went through my first program in the year 2000 right out of high school. And I really quickly learned how hard coding was. Evaluation and management and modifiers were my kryptonite. I did not want to experience those. And so that was difficult for me to have that. But I will tell you that ultimately what you learn on your own and from things like this and our podcasts with Maya and I, all the things that you take in from an education standpoint, it's going to help you with your job. We're going to go over some tips today. Remember that your job is to collect accurate data. And accurate data, of course, needs to go out on those claims because even if you get everything right from a CPT standpoint or from an ICD-10 standpoint, it doesn't mean it's getting paid. And the insurance companies, they are the ones that pay the bills unless the patient's going to pay. So I always tell physicians, either your patients are going to pay their bills or the insurances. Those are the options, unless you want to pay them, right? But again, that's the issue. And so if we're going to have insurance pay the bills, we have to follow their rules. They don't always agree with what the American Medical Association has put out there on codes. So when you go into the real live environment, you're going to notice that it's not all what you learn in your course. It's very different. Skilled coders are so important for accurate billing and compliance. And they also need to learn how to work with the billing teams if those roles are split up, which in some cases they are. I was both for most of my career, so I don't know what it's like to have the separation necessarily, but that's what I did. I knew both sides. So you also have to learn the clinical documentation and you didn't go to medical school, but over time you're going to learn things that are going to put you in a position where you're going to be considered an expert in documentation because you have to look at documentation every day. So you and your physicians are the ones that know documentation because you're in it every day. Now, maybe nurses or clinical teams know what to find in documentation, but for you, you're dissecting every piece of it. And if you can learn now how to think like an auditor when you're coding, it's going to do wonders for you down the road. So we're going to learn a little bit more today about just some of the challenges that you're facing and also how to, of course, navigate life as a new coder. So you need to understand the core responsibilities of medical coders. We're going to learn that. We're going to talk about the education, the soft skills, workflow processes, and of course, how to manage your networking and using LinkedIn, resumes, networking, things that are beneficial to you. Okay, so role overview. What does a medical coder do? Well, we talked about this. You're translating codes, you're reviewing documentation. Let's just take an operative note, for instance. If you're going to code a surgery, you need to confirm, first of all, the very top of the note, the date of service, right? You got to look at who the doctor is. Were there any assistants that performed the surgery with the doctor? What type of anesthesia was used? You have to look at the diagnosis that was ordered, the diagnosis that eventually became the ultimate diagnosis you code, which is the postoperative diagnosis. And you read the body of the note looking for evidence of codes that you can report. And this is where it gets tricky, because not everything in the operative note is reimbursable or reportable. Some of it is included in a lot of codes. So you have to know what is included and what's not. And that's where that training comes in. You have to know your guidelines, but you also have to know other things. The Medicare NCCI manual is your lifeline, because most insurance companies do follow it. And of course, Medicare does. So you want to make sure you use that. And there's a lot of great coding guidance in that manual, as well as local coverage determination policies from Medicare, laced with so much coding education, even within those policies. You can learn a lot just from reading them. Your goal is to assign accurate codes. We don't get close, or we try to get, this is close enough, right? No, it has to be accurate. There are modifiers that we use, yes, if we need to show a reduced service or an increased service, but we don't get close and we don't guess, right? We use what's in front of us to translate it into a code that exists currently. We also have our category 3 codes, right? That are, maybe not quite full category 1 codes. They're, maybe non-invasive stuff that hasn't quite made it approved yet into an actual code. And there's no fee attached to those. So whenever you bill them, and you should bill them when they're appropriate, your insurance doesn't have a fee for you. So they attach the fee when they get it. So you always want to track those and make sure that that is correct. We also have unlisted codes, right? So unlisted codes tell us that there isn't a specific code for what we did, but we want to be still reimbursed for it. So we tell the insurance company on the claim form what to compare that code to, work-wise, what the physician normally does that equates to that kind of work. And we have to put that information on the claim. It doesn't always get paid right away. We have to track it. It's a lot of work, right, for billers and coders to work together to get that done. So those are things you have to know. And our guidelines tell us not to report an unlisted code if another code applies, like a category 3 code. So we never jump right to unlisted if a category 3 code exists, and we don't jump right to unlisted if we have an appropriate code or a modifier to explain the situation, right? That's the key. So, and then compliance is number 1. Everybody who goes to our externship goes through compliance training, robust compliance training. They read all of because we have our own compliance policies. And this is the biggest pet peeve I have, is when third-party organizations do not have a compliance plan. According to the Office of Inspector General, let's just say we're talking about a third-party billing company, they're required to have a compliance plan, according to the Office of Inspector General. If they bill Medicare and Medicaid, which most of them do, they're supposed to have one. There's a whole guidance document just for third-party billing companies. And I am considered a third party. We have a compliance plan for everybody. All our consultants, and most consultants that work independent with us, they know this and they do their own. You have to be compliant 100%. Every coding exam you will take from now until forever, you may start with your CPC, but you may go and get additional specialty, credentials. There's going to be compliance questions on every exam, because compliance is number 1, always, always, always. And then learning how to collaborate with providers, physicians, non-physician practitioners, different types of those that provide services to patients. We say physicians, but there's more than just physicians that bill claims now. So we say providers. Not all of them like that terminology, but that's what we say in our world, because we don't just work with physicians. We work with non-physician practitioners, again, and pharmacists and different ones that actually have NPI numbers. So we collaborate with different types of providers, and learning how to speak to them is very crucial. I have witnessed firsthand some coders that are already working in the field that don't have good soft skills, and they talk like they talk to their husbands. to their physicians. And it's just not a good idea to get too comfortable. You want to have a form of respect for them because they are in a respectful role. They should also have respect for you as a professional. It should be a two-way street. If you're not getting respect from a physician, there's a problem. They should respect you, and the same goes the other way. When you talk to them as an expert because that's what they are. They should talk to you as an expert because that's what you are. And it doesn't always happen, but that's the way it's supposed to be ethically and compliantly. Every organization has should have a code of conduct policy. And everyone, even physicians, coders, managers, auditors, everyone has to follow that. So knowing all of these 4 key areas, this is your role. And these are the things that you should put out into the world as a coder. Education is foremost. You don't stop educating yourself. Just know that once you pass your exam, that's not it. Most of us that have been successful in the industry, we don't stop learning. We know this is an expensive career, and let's just stop right there. If you are one who is constantly concerned about getting a job and money, I understand this, but just know that once you get a job, it doesn't stop. Your credentials are expensive to maintain. CEUs aren't cheap. We do provide as much as we can, low cost. There's a lot of free things out there, but just know, don't rely on that. You have to put money into this if you want to be a coder. If that's not something you want to do, then this is a good time for you to pause and think about it. You do need to understand these code sets, and there's a lot more than just what you learned in your exam that you need to learn. You need to learn new codes that come out every year. You need to know how that replace the ones that were previously there. I still see coders that don't have current books, and I know it's expensive, but if you want to keep this career and you want to keep going, you have to have current books because the codes change every year. You can also purchase memberships to, Codify, which is the APC encoder. There's Encoder Pro through Optum. There's lots of options that you can purchase. But you also can get a lot of the same information from Medicare's physician fee schedule. That's where it comes from. So learning that, reading payer policies. If you live in the state of Arizona, you're going to want to read, the Medicaid policies, their Blue Cross coverage policies. Of course, you have United Healthcare policies. You have Cigna, Aetna. They have their policies. Even if you don't have a job, get yourself to where you can understand those policies. If you know payer policy really well in the area you're going to be applying for, that's going to really impress those you're interviewing with because you know things that, believe it or not, some of their current coders don't even know. So get to know as much as possible so that you can be successful in your interview. Now, yes, most employers do prioritize certified coders because their exams test real world scenarios. I mean, they want to know that you understand documentation, and you're going to have a learning curve. You're going to have to learn how a certain physician documents, how to find what you need to find in their documentation. Maybe you went through some coding labs, hands-on labs, maybe an internship where you got your hands on real stuff, and you want to show that off. Like, I did this. I've seen real stuff. I've coded real charts, and I understand how to do this, right? Let them know that. It's really important to put that in your profiles and, of course, in your portfolios, your resume, things like that. Certification does matter. Again, APC and AHIMA are the top 2 that most employers have on their, job descriptions. And there are others out there, that are marketed. They're cheaper education. That's true, but they're not always going to get you a job because of them not being from these organizations. And I hate to say it, it's not fair that you can't just, go to a community college and be okay. You got to go sit for those exams. So that's what this industry has, made abundantly clear that these are the 2 main ones. Not every employer will require a certification. They may train you on the job and maybe say in 6 months if you want to get a certification, but it is industry standards because coders who are certified are going to more likely keep their certification, which means you're going to go to more education sessions. They have to keep it up, so they're going to get more educated. So employers like that because they know the certified coders will stay certified, most likely. And that means a lot to them because they know they're going to get good education from their teams. Primarily, we have CPC, which is the gold standard for professional physician office. I will say AHIMA does have CCSP, which is for the professional side. And it is also a great credential. It's just more employers on the physician side end up wanting the CPC. That's just what I'm saying, because that's just the truth about it. But they both are great. CCA and CCS. CCA is more of like the apprentice type, like introductory credential to inpatient coding. And then CCS is, of course, the more advanced one. I have that one. I got my CPC first because I didn't want to touch that one because it was so hard. And I'm actually glad I did, because believe it or not, when I took it, I thought it was just inpatient, but it actually has some CPT questions, some questions about, the HCPCS manual. So it is designed for hospital level coding, using your PCS codes, the inpatient side, of hospital stays. But it's a great one to get on top of your CPC once you get there. It's great to have both. I'm just saying. I liked having both. And you do have to maintain your education units depending on where you have your credential through. Usually it's every 2 years. You just submit your CEUs, what you've gained over those 2 years. And you have a renewal every year. You have to pay for it. And yes, it keeps going up, but that's because there's inflation, guys. Everything's going up. So we can't expect this not to go up. Your CPT codes, policy changes, those are all needing to be maintained by you. You have lots of things you can do. If you want to sit for another exam, you can buy a practice exam. You can buy a practice exam even if you already took the exam, just to refresh your memory. You can stay up to date on anatomy, which is really important, especially on the surgical side. We do mostly surgery in our company, so we're always doing anatomy checks. Make sure everybody remembers where things are in the body. It's really important, and that is also true for any type of coding. Making sure we're keeping up on these things. And let's talk about technical and software skills. This is really important. You need to understand technology. It's not going anywhere. It's getting more in our faces, right? Encoders are a thing that coders are using. There's nothing wrong with encoders. We want you to rely on your books, whether they're ebooks or in person or physical books. And some of us are very old school. I've met some of you. You're very old school, and that's okay. You don't want to use an encoder. It's going to take you longer. It's nothing wrong with using it. It doesn't mean you're not a good coder if you're using an encoder. Just saying. Codify 3M is the thing. Optum 360. There's, find a code. There's a lot of different options out there. They don't replace you as a coder. They just help you be more efficient because they have data in there that you need in addition to just coding. The medical unlikely edits that exist from the payers, the LCD policies. They tell you what diagnosis codes really apply to this procedure because of the policies. They tell you the global period. There's so many things that they tell you that are not related to coding that you need to know to be a successful coder. So just because you use them does not mean you're not a good coder. It means you're an efficient coder. It means you're a smart coder. So that's what that means. So don't rely just on your books, but you do need to use them for accuracy, whether they're ebooks or physical, because you always have to confirm the information. You don't just rely on the encoder. You use it to help you get to a certain point, and then you confirm it. Data management and reporting. Things are getting more advanced with technology, so I think it's a good idea for coders to get really comfortable with Excel sheets if you're not already, understanding how to use Excel. Take a class. Get to know data analytics. There's a lot of education out there on data analytics. If AI ends up becoming more in our faces like people talk about, I don't think we're there yet. There's still a lot of mistakes it's making that are huge mistakes in abstracting of data. But if you can learn to understand data analytics, understand dashboards, it's going to help you, because the data we look at, because from when we get data for our clients, doing audits, for instance, auditing is full data analytics. It's understanding what the data is telling you, understanding what the denials are telling you, and that helps us when we audit. So knowing the codes, knowing the guidelines is step one. Applying those codes. Once you become a really good production coder, is then a good time for you to think about auditing, because you know so well what needs to be there. And so you can look deeper and look at these things and understand them. So all of these things are important. You need to understand the resources at your disposal. Software you need to learn. If you're new, you're not going to know all these EMR systems. You're just not going to. But when you get a job, they will provide training. But there are a lot of, how-to guides and, YouTube videos out there for different EMR systems. I know eClinicalWorks has a lot of free videos out there on how to use their software. And that's a really popular software that a lot of practices use. So there's great information there. There's a lot of different softwares you can get online on YouTube and watch videos on how to use their software. So you can tell future employers that you have a good understanding of how their software works. And then soft skills, right? Professional attributes. We're going to talk about some of these. It's important. I still think this is very underrated. Knowing how to code is only part of the piece. Being a human being and knowing how to communicate is huge. And we're seeing a lot of problems there. Attention to detail. We cannot rush through this process. No matter how much stress and pressure your managers may put on you, you need to be able to speak up and say this process needs to be slowed down, and I'm not going to rush this because I want to do it right. Speak up, because it's your credential on the line if it gets done wrong. Learn to spot documentation. When you're doing, attention to detail, laterality. If it's missing, what's the guideline say on that? Where can I get the laterality from? Specificity. I'm missing details that I know need to be there. Before I put this out into the world, shouldn't I have a conversation with somebody to make sure it gets done correctly? It's much better to contact the physician ahead of time and let them make a change that, maybe they forgot something, than to let it go out and then you can't fix it later. There's a really great soft skill is communication with physicians. Crossing, verifying the operative note with what the physician is wanting to report or the code you're choosing. Just always make sure you're always reviewing everything. Analytical thinking. You have to interpret complex clinical and procedural terms. There is not an SOP that you can create for a process for a coding team to follow. I'm sorry. I used to work for an organization and they wanted an SOP on everything because they wanted their team to be able to do anything at any given point. And it's just not possible with coding. The SOP is the guidelines, guys. That is the guideline. I can't teach what is already there. I can teach you application, but I can't be there sitting next to you every single day telling you what to do. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to have to make decisions independently. And you cannot have someone sit next to you every second and make sure what you're putting in the system is good. You have to make a decision based on what's in front of you. And so you're going to learn that over time. You're going to learn how to make mistakes and learn from them. But you have to think analytically. You interpret complex systems. Identify when to query providers for clarification and when not to, right? Now, if you're a HEMA coder, you already know that there's an official query process for inpatient coders. On the outpatient side in the office, there isn't like a general official process, but it really just means knowing what to ask or not to ask. There are things that you definitely need to ask the physician, and other things, if you keep asking, you're just going to annoy them because they already know that the information's in there. You just haven't found it. So asking questions in the right way as you're learning is, I know that this is the code. Can you help me identify this and this? Do you think this is correct? Would you agree with this? And putting it on them as the expert to say that and to have them show you where it is. Now, there are times that information is already there. And so when I'm training new coders, I always help them to see that, physicians also know how to code. A lot of them do know how to code. If you come to them and ask them routine, questions that you should already know, they may get a little frustrated. So that's why sometimes managers with new coders, they kind of pull the reins back a little bit and they don't let you talk to physicians right away until you learn what you need to ask them and the right things to ask them. Once you learn that, then most managers and supervisors should let you talk to physicians once you learn the proper way to communicate with them. We still want you to ask questions. We want to make sure that you're not inadvertently communicating incorrectly with them. And it's a learning process. And so we also help you with that when you're in our externship. You need to learn how to draft clear, concise provider queries. Also partner with billing teams and denials and payer feedback, because if you understand the denials that are happening and you understand why, that is a great thing for your toolbox to go back to the physician and saying, we're receiving these denials and we believe it's because of this. Can you clarify? There's a lot of ways you can communicate with them that puts it back on them and they understand, okay, yes, I need to update this. Thank you for this information. So again, giving them data they can see that proves what is happening, right? Time management and organization, very important. I'm sure you did this when you were on your exam. You had to have good time management skills and organization. You have to manage high chart volumes without sacrificing accuracy. A lot of coders are feeling the pressure these days. They're feeling a lot of pressure to have huge volumes out. And I'm feeling a little pressure right now because I've got a client we're working with and we have high volumes right now, but we're getting it done because we know it's important. Now, you have to balance that. If you're feeling overwhelmed, you need to speak up and let somebody know, because it does nobody any good if you're overworked and underpaid and you can't get it done because you're so stressed out, because you're going to get it wrong. And that's going to hurt the patient. It's going to hurt the organization. So speak up if you're overworked and let them know that this is not healthy for anybody. Prioritize urgent cases over routine cases. I just had this conversation with our team because I was working with an organization and I found that when I was doing a workflow assessment, there were some inconsistencies in how they were spending their time. And it was because they were working on coding all day long or billing all day long, and they weren't splitting it up with the different tasks. So in a normal office, there's a lot of things that need to happen. So in the billing side, you have to run reports. You have to look at zero pay reports. You have to look at denials. You have to look at appeals. And there's all kinds of things that happen simultaneously. So that's why it's important to not keep coders and billers and others in a silo. They need to work together and help each other because they all have skills that cross each other and that can help each other. So when I talk to teams that do everything, I say, okay, you don't have to code all day long. I know there's a lot of data here, but not submitting this claim today is not going to harm the revenue. You have to get this surgery that's $18,000 that's sitting for appeal fixed. You have to get this claim reworked, because if you don't, it's going to hit timely and you're not going to get anything. So again, there's so much that's sitting there. And I think we get so focused on, we have to get it out, right? But you have stuff that you had gotten out 2 weeks ago that is sitting there rejected. And that is also money that is going to be lost if you don't fix it today. So we need good time management organization skills so we don't put all our eggs in one basket. If you do your job every day, all day long, without thinking of the other tasks you have to do, reading policies and of course looking at denials, then you're not going to be successful. We have to be able to touch every single aspect. And like I mentioned, compliance is key. We have to have the ethics and confidentiality. So important. Ethics and compliance are sometimes separated, but they're very similar. Compliance is the laws, right? The rules we have to follow, but ethics is something that prompts us to do what's right because it's the right thing. So we know that it's right to follow compliance because we're an ethical person. We will do that. So we understand that we're not going to put anything in the system that we feel is incorrect, no matter who asks us to do that. In our externship, we also, throughout the next 90 days, we're going to be looking at cases from the OIG. I encourage you to get out there and look at hhs.gov, go to the OIG's website, look at their work plan, look at what they're focusing on auditing. They're auditing certain things because they're a problem. There are, not to scare anybody, there are cases where coders have been convicted a lot, right along with physicians, for going along with the fraud. And so learning to spot those things and speaking up is very important. Learning those communication skills, those soft skills, helps you in various aspects of your life, especially in revenue cycle and coding in that role. So what is your day-to-day workflow like, right? Well, your typical day-to-day workflow, obviously, you're going to pull the chart, whether it's electronic or of course, I really hope we don't have any paper charts anymore, but we might sitting out there somewhere. Documentation review. You're going to read thoroughly. Now, if it's an E&M note, you're going to read the HPI. You're going to read the exam, the final determination. Even though our guidelines now state that we don't level based on the HPI, the exam anymore, the data still needs to make sense. And what we're finding is that we have at the very end of the documentation that we get to the bottom, and us in the coding world, or those auditors, we always say the phantom diagnosis just appeared out of nowhere, right? And so those things can happen. And so I'll say the patient will say the HPI, they'll say what they came in for, what their problems are. You get down to the bottom, and the doctor diagnoses them with hepatic encephalopathy. And then somewhere in the middle, though, the exam shows everything's normal. So as a coder, if you see something that doesn't look right, it probably isn't right. So speak up about it. That's what your job is, to review documentation, not only to find the right code, but to spot inconsistencies and issues that you can report to those that need to know. In operative notes, same thing. If you're seeing that maybe they gave you the code they want to report and you're verifying it, but you don't see evidence of it, you can't report it. In orthopedics, I see it a lot. I see where there's just missing information. Like if you're going to bill an open reduction of an internal fixation of a fracture, I have to see where you fixated it. Otherwise, it's not an open reduction internal fixation. Otherwise, that's not that. So I need to know those pieces. And I see it sometimes where I know it probably happened, but it's just not documented. So looking for those things. Apply the code. Once you have confidence in CPT, ICD-10, HCPCS codes, based on documentation, you apply the codes, right? Quality check. Check it again. Check NCCI. Check your payer edits. Check policies. And most of us that work in the field, we kind of know our policies, but we don't want to rely on ourselves all the time. We want to make sure that we're looking at, checking ourselves, right? If we find a problem, like, oh, wait, there's a policy on this. This might be a problem. Let me talk to the physician, because if you don't talk to him now and you bill it out, you're done. And then, of course, it's the entry part, whether you do it or you send it off to the billers in a queue. I think that's also an issue because I see a lot of coders that talk to me and they're like, the billers billed it, but then I don't know if it's correct, or no one ever tells me the feedback. And so if you're not giving your coders feedback, it's a problem, because how can they fix the issues if they don't know what's going on? So if they can't see the data. So it's a training issue that we're seeing in a lot of organizations. And then knowing the difference between inpatient and outpatient, on the professional fee side, you might still deal with that, where your physicians go in the hospital and they see patients and they bill like an actual office or hospital level visit with a procedure consultation or in the office. The difference between inpatient and outpatient, though, is the revenue cycle. So for those that work in the hospital side, they are billing the entire hospital stay. And so they assign the actual revenue based on the hospital stay. What ultimately was decided was the reason for the admission. That's the DRG. And they assign a certain diagnosis that drives that DRG assignment. The payer has a fee that is attached to that DRG. There's other things that they have to know that go into that process, which, I teach that part, so I'm not going to go into that today. That's a whole class. but that's different, right, than outpatient, where it's based on each individual face-to-face visit, not on the entire stay. There's lots of rules. Maybe you actually work in an ASC and they have their own rules, right? Or outpatient hospital departments, where that's, the COC credential. You might have that. Though that's different, right? So there's different types of revenue that exist out there. So knowing where you fall and what type of policies you're going to be reviewing. And productivity metrics. This is important. We do this at our organization for those that are employed with us. We do check their productivity. We want to know how many charts per hour, per day, overall, that they're able to perform, because we have to know that to place them with certain clients. If a certain client has a certain volume of procedures every week, we can't put them on that if they are not able to meet that standard, because we want to stay within 48 hours of getting the chart out. That's our requirement. And we want a 95% accuracy. So if your coders are going less and less every month and they're getting lower and lower on accuracy, there's a training issue, or there's another issue you need to address. So looking at what we call key performance indicators, or KPIs, these metrics tell your supervisor something about you, because numbers don't lie. But there are reasons why the numbers might be falling, and we need to know why. So if your charts per hour are doing great, but then you fluctuate. So like May, you were doing good. You dropped in June on your charts per day. Then you picked it back up in July. Great. What happened in June? What was going on, right? And then, of course, with the accuracy percent, maybe you had a higher accuracy in June, but your volume was low. What was the reason? Maybe that's a good thing, right? And that's a good metric to look at. Yeah, they did less charts, but look at their accuracy. They did more charts in May, but their accuracy was lower. That could be an issue, right? Because maybe I'm pushing them too hard. And if they're working more accurately and taking more time with the charts, that's their accuracy level is really high, even though their metrics for charts per day is low. So what would I rather have? So those are the things I look at when I'm looking at data. It tells me a lot. So what are the common challenges? Yes, these are what we deal with every single day. Rejections and denials, evolving code sets, complex documentation, payer-specific edits and policies that constantly change as well. So navigating this today in 2025 is insane. It's not easy. You feel like a yo-yo a lot of the time. So this is what we deal with. So don't be afraid to get in and get messy with this. But again, know that it's not going to be a walk in the park. It's going to be hard, but anything worth doing is hard, in my opinion. So I think if you master these things, get to know what is a medical necessity according to the payers, read those policies, understand the difference between rejection and denial. If you want to learn more about billing, I highly recommend it because as a coder, it is so important. So some have even gone on to get their CPB credential with AAPC, which is the Certified Professional Biller. I know people like Christine Hall that teaches that course, and it's really great. Maya Turner on my team also does. So again, there's a lot of great individuals out there who teach that for AAPC, and so you can get some really great training on that. So build a strong foundation. So again, regularly review, like we talked about, anatomy and physiology, reinforce that clinical knowledge that you need to have. Even though you didn't go to medical school, you still need to understand the clinical terms. And I feel like it's kind of like this crazy thing where medical coders are thought of as just data entry. And it really frustrates me because we do so much more than that. We're not just data entry. Actually, we don't really enter data a lot of the time. We enter things on a spreadsheet, or we tell the coders what to code, or the billers what to code, but oftentimes we're not actually entering the stuff. The billers are. We often get confused for billers, but sometimes we're separate and we're actually processing a lot of data, but we're not entering this. We're not data entry. And you always want to stay current with coding seminars, webinars, not just AAPC, NAMIS, the National Association of Medical Auditors, they have great education. I'm speaking for them on June 24th on auditing. I love to speak for AAPC. I speak at AAPC HealthCon every year. I'll be back there in San Diego this year talking about podiatry auditing, and also I'll be talking about how to interpret the DRG for various conditions for the inpatient side. So there's a lot of information you can get at HealthCon or conferences. I know it's expensive, but the more you invest in yourself, the more you're going to be able to network and get deeper into this career that you want so badly. So stay current on that. And remember to leverage your mentorship and networking. Now, I know, and I've learned this recently, not everyone likes social media. I understand. I don't always like it myself. I'm going to be honest and truthful here, and you may not like it. Social media has become a necessity for the job market. I don't like it any more than you do. I would rather just be able to apply for a job, get a call back. But there is AI that is being used in these platforms that are pulling specific keywords on resumes because they don't have time to talk to everybody who's applying. So they use AI to look for certain keywords. So this is happening. So you not only have to understand that piece, but you also have to get out where other recruiters are, and they're on LinkedIn. They're on social media platforms. We have a Facebook group called HIM Educators. And I started that group for actual recruiters to join with those that, are actual educators also can help coders find jobs. And they post jobs there all the time. Not all of them are entry level, but some of them are. So that I use that group. And then there's also a lot of LinkedIn groups, guys, on networking for new coders. There's groups on LinkedIn. I don't know if anyone knows that. Just like Facebook has groups, LinkedIn has groups too. You can join that's where they post things and career tips. So those are things to keep in mind. You definitely want to have a picture on your profile. If you're going to use LinkedIn, have a picture. Have a professional profile. You are a professional. That's what you're trying to be, right? So have a professional profile. You don't have to be a content creator. You just need to be visible and occasionally, post, right? So we're going to talk about some of those things. If you want to kind of map out your career, you want to kind of figure out where am I going to start, right? So if you're new, you're going to start at entry level. I do have a little bone to pick with some of these recruiters and some of these job postings that say entry level and they want 1 to 2 years. That's not entry level. Entry level is no experience. Maybe up to 1 year, but not 1 to 2 years. That's not entry level. I would say it's mid-level potential if it's 1 to 2 years. It's, and then senior coder, of course, 5 to 10 years, and then auditor from there. These are the path you could go down. Now, you want to make sure that you also think about other roles down the road that eventually you could go down. You could become an educator. You could become a revenue cycle director. So many people I know have started out as new coders, and in 2 to 3 years, they become directors. And it's crazy how fast, because they're not stopping. They're keeping their momentum going. They're educating themselves. So you could do that if you have that drive. And sometimes it's opportunity, sometimes it's being visible and relevant, showing who you are out there in the world. There are specialties. If you want to get into orthopedics or general surgery, there are those particular credentials you can go for. Again, it's recommended that you have, of course, the experience, but you don't have to. It's just recommended for those exams. Other roles, again, other certifications. There's an auditing certification, risk adjustment. That's actually really hot, and it's one that a lot of organizations do hire new coders for risk adjustment just to help them with the HCC coding. So a lot go into that to start, and it's a great avenue to start. But one thing that we're finding is that some people get so rusty on CPT because they're only doing ICD-10. So you can try that out. It's a great thing to get your feet wet, but you may not want to stay there. A lot of it's contract work, but it's a great foot in the door to get in the door and then maybe go from there. Those are things to think about. So now let's get to the meat of it. We got a few minutes left. We're going to talk about just optimizing your LinkedIn profile. Now, for new coders, I want you to think, don't be ashamed of your credential. You might think, if I put CPCA out there, they're just going to pass me up. Not necessarily. There's things you can do to counteract that, but you need to be honest and show your credential behind your name, either behind your name or in your actual profile where it's easy to see. I don't have all my credentials behind my name on my profile because I just have too many. It's a lot. So I put it in my profile so they can see it. Mention any volunteer clinics, externships, internships you've done, related coursework. Talk about what you learned in your education. If you went to college and got a degree, that's great. Talk about that. Anything that you've done that shows your expertise, even without actual hands-on experience. You've done a lot of things already that show that. Highlight transferable skills. There's a lot of things that you probably know how to do from other industries that transfer to coding. Analytical skills, attention to detail, the software, Microsoft Office. Like, do you know Excel? That's great. People love that. Under the project section, include any assignments or personal case studies that you did that you were successful. Show what you know, especially about their specialty. If you're going into orthopedics, talk about how much you love this or how much you love that. It's really good in your cover letters. And always have a cover letter, please. Don't just submit an application. That's really important. Recommendations and endorsements. So try to get others, maybe your instructors, others to endorse you on LinkedIn. There's an endorsement section where you can actually endorse people for skills, and that helps them become visible to other people with those that need those skills. So the more you endorse yourself or others, it's really important. If you don't have a healthcare background, you can ask somebody who you may have known from a previous job to vouch for those skills. Having your references on your resume, of course, that show that people can vouch for you. Engage with content. So if you're on LinkedIn or Facebook or wherever, comment on posts that you find interesting. So if someone posted an article from the OIG on a fraud case and you find it interesting, you have something to say about it, or you agree with it, comment. That gets you visible. You get your profile noticed. Someone might notice that, oh, you're an aspiring coder. I'm going to click on her or his profile and or that person's profile, and I'm going to see what they're about. Happens all the time. So many people get noticed just from comments. Like, I commented on something the other day and someone offered me a job, and I was like, well, I'm not interested. But that's what can happen if you comment. You don't have to post yourself, but engaging with others in commenting does get you noticed as well. Share a coding tip of the week, or something that you found interesting when you were studying. Like, I read this the other day. A lot of my externs were commenting when I sent them the LCD policy for total joint arthroplasty. They found it fascinating because they had never read that. And so, like, that is interesting, right? You can post those things, like what you found interesting that you learned this week. I just read an article on urology, and as I was researching deeper into some of the stuff, it was really cool, because I do research on, and I write articles on certain things. And so, again, you can also do that. You can try out your research skills and write an article. And that also shows your abilities if you get published on AAPC's magazine, or if you want to publish with us, if you want to write an article and publish on our website. We always accept, people to write articles for us. You can, and there's no cost. You can just, it helps you get your name out. And if we approve the article, it gets published on our website. So it's a great thing to do. Local AAPC chapter events, attend those meetings. Sometimes you can attend other areas, so you can get multiple, options. There is some great topics that are coming out. And if you follow certain people that I follow and get your network built, you'll see a lot of them post different events. I always post where I'm speaking. I speak at a lot of chapter events. So follow your local chapter, follow other chapters, make sure you can see where you can get the best for your education. Volunteer to assist. Volunteer, if there's a local chapter, have you thought about becoming an officer? That's a great way to get noticed and to network. Online communities, like I mentioned, Facebook, coding groups, LinkedIn. Informational interviews. So reach out to networking coders on LinkedIn, ask for 15 minutes to learn about their day-to-day. I get this all the time, and I do it all the time. I love doing it for people. I love helping people understand what a coder does all day. So I'll schedule those informational interviews with people. Mentorship programs. Again, I have the externship program. I can't let everybody in the world into my program. I don't have that much time. I would have no time for my family, but I do the best I can. And there's other organizations that have externships out there. AAPC has a mentorship program. I've done it. It's helpful to people. So just do what you can to help the industry. If you are out there and you have experience, volunteer for some of these programs. They're great. Okay. And then best practices for resumes. Think about the format and structure. Keep it clean, easy to read. Nothing out there says you have to have a one-page resume. Some people just can't do that because they have so much they have more information. Like, mine is 2 pages, only because I need to make sure to show my relevance and my certifications. But not everyone has to do that. Some people can have a 1-pager. If it can be 1 page, great, that's preferred. If it's 2 pages, it's not a deal breaker. It's not going to break the deal for you. Just make it clean and organized, and make sure they can find what they need quickly. Your credentials, your experience, the soft skills you have, the keywords that they want to see, right? The education, the coursework, the anatomy, terminology, analytical skills, things that they need to know you have. Talk about that you have strong attention to detail. That's important. Data entry accuracy. What is your accuracy there? How fast can you type? That's good stuff. Problem solving skills. How did you, even including, scenarios, right? When you reach out to, and there's nothing wrong with you reaching out to a potential employer or potential hiring manager that you applied, and you just want to let them know how interested you are and that they might be interested to know something recently that you were able to do that shows your analytical problem solving skills. Great way to reach out. Communication. Make sure it's clear and concise, no typos. That's not a good thing. Make sure they understand what you're doing now and what you're aspiring to. Again, just because you have non-healthcare experience doesn't mean it shouldn't be on your resume. They need to know your job experience. But in those, use terms that transfer to the current role that you want. So if you had skills, maybe you were working as a cosmetologist, right? You have skills that transfer, even though it's a completely different industry. Use those same skills that transfer over into your resume for this job. Showcase relevant projects or volunteer work. If you did any of that, what did you do? Did you coded cases? These were real cases, and they were in the training environment. They were real cases, and your accuracy. You volunteered for this. You had this experience, or you learned from this person, and talk about those things. Keywords. Again, you got to tell your credential. Got to have it. These are some of the key things that you want to have in there that you need to learn. Again, add analytical skills, add communication, Microsoft Office, like Excel, like those terms are also helpful. Professional summary. So this is usually at the beginning of your resume. I'm sorry, the end, excuse me, summary. Detail-oriented CPCA with strong foundation in anatomy, medical terminology, and regulatory compliance, eager to apply classroom knowledge to real-world coding challenges. Beginning or end, wherever you want to put it, doesn't really matter. I see it at the beginning and the end. It just depends on where you want to put it. But I mean, usually it's the front, but I've seen it at the end too. Okay, when you're interviewing, okay, common interview questions. How would you approach coding a chart if you're unfamiliar? Can you walk me through how you learn a new coding guideline? Why coding if you don't have healthcare experience? Some questions you get asked can be scary. I would always go on and read just different blogs of like what common interview questions are to be prepared. And sometimes they're kind of cliche, I would say, because they get the same ones over and over again. When I interview, I try to give different ones that are a little bit, more fun. But again, I'm a different kind of interviewer than others are. But just understand that those are things you want to know. And this is important. Interview prep, especially when hiring manager isn't a pro. I'm going to be very honest. I have interviewed with hiring managers that should not be interviewing people. They just don't have the skills. They don't have communication skills. They don't know what to ask. I've also interviewed people. I feel like I do it pretty well. And so I have skills to do that. And so people tend to like interviewing with me. And actually, a lot of times organizations would have me as a consultant help them find people. And so I would interview them. So again, you're not always going to find somebody who interviews well. So you can flip the script. If they ask vague or off-topic questions, steer it back to them. I'd love to share how my CPCA training prepared me to tackle coding challenges. Would you like me to walk through a specific example of a chart review? Like, talk to them. Like, you start interviewing them. What coding platform do you currently use? Have questions ready. Because they're going to ask, do you have any questions? And you want to have questions ready. You don't want to just have a blank stare. Is there a training or onboarding process for new coders? How do you measure accuracy and productivity here? What's the expectation for an entry-level coder? Can you describe a typical day for someone? When I was interviewing people for the externship, I was really proud of them for having questions ready to go. That's how you prepare for an interview. And I think that was a great skill they already have. So again, we're going to build on that. And even if you're not part of the externship, every month we're going to do something like this live on LinkedIn to give you some tips. So stay tuned. We don't want you to feel like this is the end of the road for you. We are going to give a lot back to the industry. Even if you can't be in our externship right now, we are going to give a lot back to everybody. So demonstrate value without prior healthcare experience. So bring a one-pager coding readiness sheet, milestones you've completed, things that you've done. Not necessarily a resume, but just like kind of like a portfolio, right? Offer a mini live coding demo. Say, hey, if you have a chart right here, you can de-identify it. I code it for you right here. In my previous role in retail customer service, I maintained 100% accuracy. Talk about your detail-oriented skills and how you understand process improvement, workflow. Those are things that transfer. While I was interviewing people, this is a true story, just happened a couple weeks ago. I was interviewing somebody and she showed the most excellent analytical workflow skills just in the interview. And I decided right then and there to bring her on as my project manager because she had those skills. She's still going to code for us. But again, like I knew right away she had those skills. And so I brought her on already. So those things can happen just in an interview. And then resources and next steps. Get to know these resources. Yes, they might cost money. But like I said, this is a career that costs money. It's not free. And so make sure you're getting on cms.gov, get on CMS's listservs, get your email out there so you can get reminders on new policies that come through. Really great stuff. Read the NCCI manual. I know it's a lot of reading, but hey, you don't have a job right now. You got time. So read it. Read those policies while you're looking for a job. Polish your LinkedIn profile today. Send me a screenshot. Tell me what you did today. I'd love to hear from you. I want to know what you did today that you learned from this presentation that you're going to implement right now. Share with me. I want to know. Draft a targeted resume template. And if you want to share it with me, have me review it with you, I'd be happy to. You can also